The year was 2237, and humanity had reached a point in history that once belonged only to dreams. Fusion drives and gravitational sails had turned once impossible voyages into months-long journeys. Earth's colonies dotted nearby systems like beads along an invisible thread. Trade, exploration, and curiosity had become the pulse of the Terran era. It was during one of these voyages, a deep space mapping mission beyond the Perseus Spur, that the science vessel Pathfinder detected an anomaly. At first it seemed like a drifting asteroid cluster, but the readings didn't match. The signatures were too uniform, too deliberate. The ship adjusted course and soon discovered the truth, a formation of immense vessels, their surfaces gleaming like polished obsidian, hung silently in the void. They weren't human. When the lead vessel signaled, the crew responded, their voices a mix of awe and caution. What followed was humanity's first formal contact with the Zorathi Dominion. The aliens appeared in holographic projection, tall, segmented forms with shimmering carapaces that reflected ambient light. Their movements were precise, almost mechanical, but their voices, translated through advanced linguistic algorithms, carried a tone of smooth diplomacy. "Greetings, travelers from Sol," the Zorathi envoy said, inclining its angular head. "We have observed your progress. Your species shows adaptability and promise. The Dominion welcomes dialogue." The message reached Earth within days, and the United Terran Council called for an emergency assembly. Politicians, scientists, and cultural leaders gathered beneath the crystalline dome of Geneva Arcology. The prospect of joining a galactic community stirred excitement and cautious optimism. For centuries, humanity had imagined it was alone or too far from its neighbors to matter. Now, here was proof that not only did intelligent life exist, it had found them first. The first series of meetings took place aboard the Celestial Reach, a neutral orbital platform stationed above Europa. The Zorathi delegation arrived with ceremonial precision, their every movement deliberate, their speech formal and measured. They shared fragments of their history, a vast network of worlds unified under the Dominion, committed to order and stability. To Earth's representatives, the Zorathi offered partnership. Trade routes, cultural exchanges, and technological collaboration were presented as opportunities. The conditions seemed minimal: the sharing of navigational charts, cooperation in maintaining interstellar safety, and adherence to certain stability protocols that would ensure smooth relations. For most of the human delegation, it was a dazzling opportunity. The Zorathi's technology hinted at centuries of advancement: energy fields that could shield entire cities, agricultural methods that could feed billions without strain, medical treatments that extended lifespans far beyond current limits. The vote in the Terran Council was overwhelmingly in favor of signing the Accord of Mutual Prosperity. Still, there were voices of caution. Rear Admiral Soren Hale, a decorated officer of the Terran Defense Fleet, warned that humanity knew little of the Dominion's true nature. "Partnership," he said in a closed session meeting, "is a word that can mean many things. We should remember, space is vast, but power often seeks to fill every corner it finds." His warnings were noted but soon overshadowed by the excitement sweeping through Earth's cities. The signing ceremony was broadcast live across human space. On Earth, crowds filled plazas to watch the event on massive holoscreens. On Mars, settlers in the Valles Marineris habitat toasted the new age with recycled champagne. Even the asteroid mining crews paused their shifts to witness history. Humanity, it seemed, had stepped onto the grand stage of the galaxy. The Zorathi envoy's parting words during the ceremony were eloquent and reassuring. "We look forward to shaping a shared future." The phrase was repeated across media channels as a promise of unity. Few stopped to consider how, in the wrong context, shaping could mean molding or controlling. As the celestial reach drifted in its steady orbit and the delegations dispersed, a silent shift had already begun. Agreements, after all, are not always balanced in the way they are first imagined. And somewhere in the quiet corridors of Dominion Command, the Zorathi were already discussing how best to integrate this promising, adaptable new species into their carefully maintained order. The first year of the Accord of Mutual Prosperity was everything the United Terran Council had hoped for. Zorathi trade vessels arrived at orbital docks, their holds filled with exotic metals, advanced fabrication, units, and crystalline data libraries. In return, humanity sent refined alloys, fusion reactor components, and vast shipments of rare earthborn elements. The arrangement seemed mutually beneficial, at first. The Dominion's representatives spoke of shared growth, and human merchants saw their profits soar. Even the frontier colonies, often the last to feel the effects of political agreements, found their markets flooded with new tools and medicines. But slowly, the tone of the partnership began to change. The first hint came in the form of a stability directive issued by the Zorathi Economic Bureau. It suggested that all interstellar shipping lanes be recharted according to Dominion-approved routes to ensure efficiency and security. While it was framed as a recommendation, human freighters that ignored the directive soon found their docking requests delayed or denied at Zorathi-controlled stations. Then came the matter of inspection. Rights. Dominion agents began appearing at human ports, dressed in polished metallic carapace armor that gleamed under station lights. They claimed their presence was to maintain safe trade practices, but their inspections often extended beyond cargo holds, reaching into crew quarters and even personal data systems. Earth's diplomats raised the issue in joint council meetings, only to be met with courteous but unyielding responses. "We are safeguarding our shared interests," the Zorathi spokesofficers would say, their multifaceted eyes unreadable. On Mars, the colony of Eos Prime felt the first real strain. Dominion oversight extended to local governance, with new regulations limiting the use of certain mining equipment. These restrictions, the Zorathi explained, were to preserve environmental stability, but they conveniently redirected rare mineral exports toward Dominion processing facilities. At first, most citizens accepted these changes as the natural friction of interstellar politics. But Rear Admiral Soren Hale, still stationed at Luna Defense Command, kept a meticulous log of every new directive and regulation. The pattern, he noted, was not one of shared growth, but of gradual dependency. By Tiru. The third year, the demands grew more specific. All human starships operating beyond Sol were required to carry Dominion navigation beacons, devices that transmitted real-time location data to Zorathi central relays. Officially, this was to prevent misunderstandings in neutral space. Unofficially, it meant the Dominion now had constant knowledge of humanity's fleet movements. The tipping point for many came when the Zorathi introduced quota cycles. Every human colony was assigned a contribution requirement, a set amount of goods, energy, or raw materials to be delivered to the Dominion each year. Failure to meet these quotas resulted in restricted access to Dominion markets and technology. Public opinion began to fracture. On Earth, some still argued that the arrangement was worth the compromises. "We are part of something greater now," one popular media commentator said. "We cannot expect total independence if we wish to thrive in a galactic order." Others were less convinced. Protests broke out in the floating cities of Pacifica, where citizens marched through the transparent walkways with banners calling for sovereignty. On Europa Station, engineers began installing redundant communication arrays designed to bypass Dominion monitoring, quietly and without official approval. Meanwhile, on the outer frontier, whispers of resistance began to circulate. Captains of long-haul freighters spoke of rerouting their cargo through unregistered paths, avoiding Dominion checkpoints entirely. It was risky, but the allure of unmonitored trade was strong. The Zorathi seemed aware of these murmurs, but did not act. immediately. In their view, humanity's adaptability was both a strength and a weakness, a resource that could be shaped given the right pressure. Dominion records from this period, later recovered, would reveal a telling line from a high-ranking strategist. "Humans can bear more weight. Let us see how much before they bend." In Luna's subterranean command centers, Admiral Hale watched the developments with growing unease. His reports to the Terran Council were blunt, but often dismissed as alarmist. Still, he continued gathering intelligence, convinced that humanity was being led into a position from which it could not easily retreat. The Dominion's smile was still in place, its offers still couched in the language of partnership. But beneath that polished diplomacy, the first layers of control had been set, and they were tightening. By the fourth year of the Accord, the signs of strain were no longer subtle. On the frontier worlds, those farthest from Earth's reach but closest to the Zorathis, the partnership's cracks had widened into visible fractures. On Mars, in the domed capital of Eos Prime, miners reported long delays in receiving replacement parts for their excavation machines. The Dominion's logistics offices, once quick to deliver, now prioritized regional stability needs elsewhere. With fewer parts, mining output slowed, and the colony fell short of its quota cycle for the first time. The response came quickly. Dominion supply vessels skipped their regular visits, and the colony's trade access to several key markets was temporarily suspended. It was not presented as punishment, merely the natural result of logistical rebalancing, but the effect was the same. Mars felt the squeeze. Farther out, the agricultural colony of Hestia 4 was ordered to redirect a quarter of its food exports to a Zorathi station suffering from seasonal shortfall. Local farmers protested, pointing out that the diversion would leave them with limited reserves for the coming winter cycle. The Dominion's reply was polite but final. The Accord prioritizes the needs of the whole. These decisions, repeated across dozens of settlements, began to wear at the spirit of the frontier. Colonists were used to hardship. That was part of life beyond the core systems. But this was different. It wasn't weather, poor soil, or equipment failure. It was policy. On Luna Station, Admiral Soren Hale's private network of observers continued to send him updates. The reports told the same story in different words: shortages, restrictions, and subtle but steady erosion of self-governance. Hale compiled the data into encrypted summaries for the Terran Council. His tone was increasingly direct. "This is not partnership. This is positioning. We are being prepared for dependency." In Geneva, however, the Council was divided. The Dominion still provided technology transfers, and their market remained open to human goods, so long as quotas were met. Many leaders argued that adjustments were natural as both civilizations learned to work together. Hale's warnings, though officially acknowledged, were quietly filed under "Monitor for Escalation." Back on the frontier, escalation was already happening. In the asteroid belts of the Outer Sol region, independent freighters began altering their shipping patterns. Captain Elara Vance of the Prospector's Hope started taking indirect routes, slipping through areas of unregistered space to avoid Dominion checkpoints. She wasn't alone. A loose, unspoken network of captains began sharing hidden waypoints and safe rendezvous coordinates. The risks were high. Navigational hazards, uncharted debris fields, and the ever-present possibility of a Dominion patrol stumbling upon them. Yet the reward was clear. Every successful run brought goods and resources to human colonies without Zorathi oversight. Hestia 4's governor, Mara Lynn, became a quiet supporter of these runs. She publicly adhered to Dominion regulations, but quietly purchased goods from these unmonitored shipments to keep her colony supplied. "We're not rebelling," she told her closest advisors. "We're surviving." Meanwhile, on Earth, the Iowa First, coordinated civilian protests began to spread. They were small at first, gatherings in city squares, placards bearing slogans like "Partnership, not control," but their persistence caught the attention of both the Council and the Dominion. The Zorathi's official response was minimal, a statement reaffirming their commitment to mutual benefit. Unofficially, their patrols near human space grew more frequent. Large, dark silhouettes began appearing at the edges of human shipping. Lanes, silent observers watching every transit. In the shadow of these developments, Admiral Hale convened a discreet meeting in the lower levels of Luna Station. Present were engineers, defense strategists, and a handful of political figures known for their independence. The discussion was focused, the mood tense. "We can't act openly," Hale said. "Not yet, but we need options. Technology, logistics, supply chains. Anything we can keep in human hands." From that meeting, a quiet initiative began to take shape. It had no official name, no public record, and no central leadership. Only a shared understanding. If humanity was to keep its future, it needed to start preparing now. The Dominion's public face remained one of cooperation and civility. But in the halls of Luna Station, and in the whispered exchanges of freighter crews on the frontier, another truth was taking root. The pressure was increasing, and sooner or later, something would have to give. By the 5th year of the Accord, the quiet frustration simmering across human space began to find its voice. The tipping point came from an unexpected place, a small, unassuming transport ship called the Morning Star. The Morning Star was a mid-range freighter that ran supply routes between Mars, Luna, and the agricultural colonies. Its captain, Arlen Dross, had spent most of his career avoiding trouble. He wasn't a soldier, a politician, or an activist. But on a routine run to Hestia 4, Dominion inspectors boarded his ship for what they called a random efficiency check. The kayak inspection stretched into hours. Cargo bays were emptied, storage containers unsealed, and personal logs reviewed. When Dross objected, the lead inspector's tone never rose, but the meaning was clear. "Compliance is the measure of trust," the Zorathi said before leaving. Something in Dross shifted that day. Instead of filing a complaint through official channels, where it would likely vanish into procedure, he recorded a short message from his ship's bridge. His voice was calm, steady, but carried the weight of frustration that many in human space already felt. "This is Captain Arlen Dross of the Morning Star. If you're hearing this, you know what's been happening. We are still explorers, still builders, still free people. But every day we are asked to give more control away. I'm telling you, we must prepare for self-reliance. We must be ready to stand on our own." He transmitted the message to several independent relay stations before continuing his route. Within hours, it had spread far beyond its intended reach. Traders carried it on data chips. Colonists forwarded it through personal networks. Even within Earth's core systems, it played in quiet gatherings where citizens leaned in to listen. The Dominion noticed almost immediately, but rather than suppress the message, they allowed it to circulate. The logic, recorded later in Dominion archives, was simple. Let them speak. The more they vent, the less they act. They miscalculated. Instead of calming the discontent, Dross's message became a unifying call. It wasn't aggressive. It didn't urge rebellion. It simply reminded humanity of its ability to endure and adapt without external control. And because it carried no direct accusations, the Dominion had no easy justification to silence it. On Mars, miners began organizing informal, self-reliance councils to pool resources and share equipment, reducing their need for Dominion-supplied parts. On the agricultural worlds, farmers exchanged old Earth-based cultivation techniques that worked without Zorathi technology. Even in the gleaming towers of Earth's megacities, small signs of change appeared. University groups hosted open discussions about the importance of maintaining cultural independence. Retired engineers dusted off designs for older human-built starship systems. These were not grand acts, but they were acts nonetheless. In Luna's underground chambers, Admiral Hale listened to the message more than once. He recognized its strength. It was a seed, not a spark. Sparks flared and burned out quickly. Seeds grew quietly beneath the surface until they were strong enough to break through. At the same time, the Dominion began making subtle adjustments. Patrols near human shipping lanes became more frequent. Inspection times increased. New efficiency guidelines required ships to submit cargo manifests before leaving port, giving the Dominion a clearer picture of what moved where. But the increased oversight only made the Morning Star message resonate more deeply. For every new regulation, there was someone who remembered Dross's calm reminder that humanity could endure without constant guidance. Months later, when the Morning Star docked at Luna Station, Captain Dross found himself quietly welcomed into Admiral Hale's private office. Hale didn't speak immediately. He simply placed a secure tablet on the desk, its screen filled with coordinated reports from across human space, all showing small, growing acts of independence. "You didn't start this," Hale said, "but you gave it shape. And if this continues, shape will turn into structure." For the first time, Dross saw the full scope of what was happening. The Dominion still believed humanity could be guided into compliance, but out on the frontier, and even in the heart of Earth's influence, a quiet movement was spreading, one that was patient, determined, and not easily undone. In the 6th year of the Accord, the Dominion scheduled its largest inspection yet. The Zorathi flagship Ithkor Vol, a vessel the length of a small moon's diameter, was dispatched to Sol to oversee what they called annual compliance verification. It was a public display as much as a logistical mission, a reminder to every human colony that the Dominion's reach was long and precise. The announcement was met with mixed feelings across human space. Some saw it as routine protocol. Others, especially those on the frontier, saw it as the next tightening of the net. On Luna Station, Admiral Soren Hale read the official notice twice and knew the visit would be an opportunity, though not the kind the Dominion expected. For years, Hale's quiet network had been working in secrecy on a project only a handful of people knew by name, the Helios Core Initiative. It wasn't a weapon in the conventional sense. It was a propulsion and energy system designed entirely from human research, independent of Dominion technology. If deployed successfully, it would make human vessels faster, more maneuverable, and entirely self-sustaining for long durations in deep space. The prototype, a newly constructed ship called the USS Titan, had been undergoing final tests in the asteroid belt. It was larger than any previous Terran Defense Fleet vessel, with smooth, reflective plating that masked its exact profile against the void. Its systems were layered in redundancies, and its main drive could cycle from sublight to jump-ready, in under half the time of standard Dominion-approved models. When the Ithkor Vol entered the Sol system, its presence was impossible to miss. Civilian ships kept their distance, and orbital docks slowed operations as the vast Zorathi vessel's shadow passed over Earth's upper atmosphere. Its arrival was accompanied by an official transmission. "People of Sol," the Dominion greets you. "We arrive to ensure the continued prosperity and stability of our partnership. Your cooperation honors the Accord." The voice was calm, ceremonial, and practiced. Admiral Hale, however, had arranged for the USS Titan to be in Earth's orbit when the flagship arrived. To the public, this was presented as a routine defense exercise. To the Dominion, it was framed as a symbol of mutual readiness. In truth, it was a calculated introduction. The meeting between the two ships was conducted in full view of every monitoring station in the system. The Ithkor Vol dwarfed the Titan in size, but size was not the message. The Titan's movements were precise, its positioning deliberate, and its energy readings showed no signs of Dominion standard systems. The Zorathi scanning crews took Notice immediately. Identify your primary power signature, came the request from the Ithcor Vol. Independent Terran design, replied the Titan's comm officer. Fully compliant with Accord safety standards. There was a pause, brief but heavy, before the Dominion acknowledged the statement. The exchange was short, civil, and without open challenge, but the implications rippled across every channel. The humans had built something without the Dominion's input, something advanced enough to stand beside their flagship without apology. After 2 days of formal inspections and public appearances, the Ithcor Vol departed sooner than scheduled. No explanation was given, but Hale knew why. The flagship's observers had seen more than a ship. They had seen the proof that humanity's development could not be entirely shaped by outside influence. The day after the flagship left, news feeds across human space lit up with images of the Titan. Civilian broadcasters replayed footage of its slow pass in front of Earth, its gleaming hull catching the light of the sun. Analysts debated its capabilities, but the core message was unmistakable. Humanity had the means to move forward on its own terms. Captain Arlen Dross, still running, the Morning Star, watched the coverage from his bridge. He didn't need to say anything. He simply leaned back in his chair, knowing that the quiet seed he'd planted was now part of something much larger. And somewhere in the vastness of Dominion space, strategists were adding a new line to their private reports. Humans remain adaptable, but they are not as dependent as predicted. The appearance of the USS Titan in Earth's orbit had done more than impress the public. It had sent a quiet but unmistakable signal to every human. Leader, captain, and colony governor, the time for scattered, isolated acts of independence was over. What came next needed to be deliberate. For years, resistance to the Dominion's overreach had been a patchwork of local decisions, a shipment rerouted here, a regulation quietly sidestepped there. These actions kept individual colonies afloat, but did little to change the larger balance. The unveiling of the Titan gave those scattered efforts a focal point. Admiral Soren Hale wasted no time. Within weeks, his network, an informal web of military officers, scientists, engineers, and civilian organizers, began to exchange more than ideas. They traded precise coordinates, shared technical breakthroughs, and coordinated movement schedules. Secure, human-built communication relays were positioned in asteroid clusters and gas giant moons, invisible to Dominion scans. In the outer colonies, freighters started flying in formation, their manifests aligned to maximize efficiency, while minimizing contact with Dominion checkpoints. On Mars, the mining sector shifted production cycles so that the majority of their output passed through human-controlled ports before the Dominion's inspectors could request access. One of the boldest moves came from Hestia 4. Governor Mara, Lynn, who had quietly supported independent shipping for years, organized a full-scale agricultural exchange between her world and 2 distant colonies, bypassing all Dominion trade routes. Officially, the shipment was listed as local redistribution. In reality, it was a demonstration that food could move across human space without Dominion authorization. These actions were not confrontations. There were no declarations, no open refusals. Every move was calculated to operate within the narrowest possible interpretation of the Accord's language, giving the Dominion no formal justification to intervene. But collectively, the effect was profound. The Dominion's influence began to erode, sector by sector. The Zorathi noticed. Patrols became more frequent, with Dominion ships shadowing human freighters across multiple systems. The number of random inspections tripled. New guidelines were issued, requiring colonies to submit detailed weekly reports on production and trade. But these reports often arrived late, incomplete, or routed through channels the Dominion couldn't fully monitor. 2. The average citizen life continued with only subtle changes. Markets still operated, shuttles still ferried passengers between stations, and news feeds still carried stories of cooperation between species. But in the background, the rhythm of commerce and travel was shifting toward human hands. One moment, in particular, crystallized the change. The Titan, on a scheduled test patrol near the outer limits of the Sol system, intercepted a Dominion inspection craft pursuing an independent freighter. The encounter was entirely civil. The Titan's captain simply offered to escort the freighter through the system's secure lanes, citing mutual safety under the accord. The inspection craft, after a brief pause, disengaged. It was a small, almost forgettable incident, but it was replayed across internal communication channels in human space. The message was clear. Dominion authority could be matched, even in open space. In private, Admiral Hale cautioned his network not to mistake this gradual shift for victory. "We are building momentum," he said in one meeting, "but momentum is fragile. One misstep, one open challenge before we're ready, and the Dominion will move against us directly. We have to finish the foundation before we raise the walls." The Yahamiawibi foundation was taking shape faster than even he anticipated. Formerly competing shipping companies formed cooperative agreements. Universities began offering programs on interstellar self-sufficiency. Civilian crews volunteered to help install additional human-built relay stations. Every action fed into the same unspoken goal: independence without open conflict, at least not yet. In Dominion space, reports grew more urgent. Phrases like increased self-coordination, systemic non-dependence, and unofficial logistics network began appearing in their assessments of human activity. One particularly sharp analysis ended with a sentence the Council of Governors found troubling. "They are moving together, and they are moving quietly." By the 7th year of the Accord, the Dominion could no longer ignore the shift in human behavior. What had once been isolated incidents of quiet independence had grown into a coordinated, system-spanning pattern. Reports from their analysts described the same trend in every region. Human fleets were operating on synchronized schedules, colonies were trading directly with one another, and the need for Dominion assistance was steadily shrinking. The Dominion Council of Governors convened in their high chamber, a vast circular hall suspended above a black ocean on their capital world. Their discussion was precise and deliberate, but beneath the formality was a note of urgency. The humans had not broken the accord, yet they were slipping out of its control. Their decision was to confront the issue under the guise of diplomacy. An invitation, polite but unmistakably compulsory, was sent to the United Terran Council. Attend a summit at the neutral station Orcs Prime, where the continued prosperity of the Accord would be discussed. The location was symbolic. Orcs Prime sat at the convergence of 3 major trade routes, all heavily influenced by Dominion oversight. The Terran Council debated for days. Some feared a trap. Others argued that refusing would only give the Dominion reason to escalate. In the end, they agreed to attend, sending a delegation led by Chancellor Elira Vance, a seasoned diplomat known for her calm but firm negotiation style. Admiral Soren Hale, though not officially part of the delegation, accompanied the fleet in a strategic advisory role. When the human ships arrived at Orcs Prime, the Dominion's presence was impossible to miss. Massive cruisers and patrol craft formed a perimeter around the station, their dark hulls glinting under the artificial sun lamps. The USS Titan was there as well, stationed at a respectful but visible distance. The opening ceremony of the summit was a display of civility. Speeches were exchanged, emphasizing unity, mutual benefit, and the shared vision of stability. But as the public portion ended and the closed-door meetings began, the tone changed. The Dominion's lead representative, Governor Athis Corin, spoke plainly. Human activity has become increasingly unmonitored. This undermines the shared structure we have built together. It must be corrected, Chancellor Vance replied without hesitation. Our activities are well within the boundaries of the Accord. If our cooperation is truly based on mutual benefit, then independence in certain matters should not be seen as a threat. Corin's eyes, multifaceted and unblinking, reflected the light of the chamber. Independence becomes a threat when it weakens the whole. The discussion stretched into days, neither side yielding. Outside the negotiation rooms, the station buzzed with tension. Human and Zorathi personnel moved through the same corridors, exchanging polite nods but speaking little. Rumors circulated of additional Dominion ships arriving in the sector, while human support vessels quietly reinforced their positions. On the third day, an incident broke the careful balance. A Dominion patrol attempted to board a human supply ship docked at one of Orith Prime's auxiliary ports. The reason given was verification of cargo compliance. The supply crew refused, citing summit protocols that protected diplomatic missions. Voices were raised, security teams arrived, and for a brief moment the docking bay was a standoff. It ended without violence, but the message was clear. The Dominion was testing boundaries. That evening, Hale met with Vance and several senior delegates in a secure chamber. "They're pushing," Hale said, "and they're watching to see if we'll step back. If we do, everything we've built over the last year will unravel." Vance looked at the faces around the table. "And if we don't? Then we'll need to be ready for what comes next." The summit ended without an official resolution, but with something more important, an unspoken acknowledgement on both sides. The Dominion now understood that humanity would not willingly return to dependency, and humanity understood that the Dominion would not let this challenge pass unanswered. When the USS Titan led the human fleet away from Orith Prime, its path was shadowed by Dominion cruisers. Neither side fired a shot, but the quiet certainty settled over both. The next meeting would not be in a conference chamber. The return from Orith Prime was quiet on the surface, but every captain, crew member, and official in the Terran fleet felt the weight of what had happened. The summit had not ended in open conflict, yet it had drawn a line that both humanity and the Dominion could see clearly. Over the weeks that followed, the Dominion increased its presence along the main trade corridors. More inspection vessels appeared. More compliance requests arrived at colonial administrations, and more reminders were sent that the accord was still in place. But the human response was different now. Instead of reacting in scattered, isolated ways, colonies and fleets moved in coordinated patterns. Supplies were rerouted through human-controlled depots. Communication relays expanded their range and redundancy, making it nearly impossible for any single point of failure to cut off contact between worlds. Civilian industries invested in developing purely human-built systems to replace Dominion. Imports not in secret but in open view. The Dominion leadership debated how to respond. Direct enforcement risked triggering the very resistance they feared. Ignoring the shift risked losing influence entirely. For a civilization accustomed to steady, calculated control, it was an uncomfortable position. The turning moment came unexpectedly. A powerful ion storm swept through the Kepler trade passage, disabling navigation systems on dozens of ships from multiple civilizations. Among them was a Dominion medical transport carrying critical supplies to one of their outer colonies. With the storm cutting off standard routes, it was the USS Titan and a small group of human escort vessels that reached the stranded ships first. The rescue was precise and efficient. Human crews stabilized the Dominion transport, repaired its damaged drives, and escorted it to safety through the storm's turbulent edge. No reward was asked for, and no conditions were attached. It was simply the right thing to do. The incident was widely reported, not just in human space, but across neutral territories. It painted a clear picture. Humanity's growing independence was not rooted in defiance for its own sake, but in the belief that cooperation worked best when both sides stood as equals. In the weeks that followed, private diplomatic channels between the Terran Council and the Dominion began to hum with activity. The discussions were careful and measured, but they moved toward a new understanding. The Dominion would maintain its trade and diplomatic ties, but its oversight would no longer extend into human internal affairs. In return, humanity would remain an active participant in mutual defense pacts and cooperative projects. The agreement was formalized as the Soul Accord, signed in the orbit of Earth aboard the Celestial Reach, the same station where the first meeting between humanity and the Dominion had taken place years before. This time there was no ambiguity in the wording. Autonomy was guaranteed, and the principles of equal exchange were enshrined in its articles. For the average citizen, the changes were subtle at first. Trade still flowed, alien visitors still walked in Earth's cities, and starships still crossed the black between worlds. But there was a difference in how people carried themselves. Colonists spoke of their worlds not as outposts of a larger order, but as part of a thriving human sphere. Students studied not just what could be learned from the galaxy, but what humanity could contribute to it. Admiral Hale, now retired from active command, stood at the window of his countryside home on Luna, watching a freighter rise on its ascent path. Captain Arlen Dross, still piloting the Morning Star, carried cargo and messages to the farthest colonies, his bridge console now bearing the crest of the Soul Accord. Chancellor Elira Vance continued her diplomatic work, fostering ties that were strong because they were chosen, not imposed. Across the galaxy, the lesson was remembered in many languages and many forms. A people from a single blue world, scattered among the stars, had faced the weight of control and chosen to stand. Not through sudden rebellion, not through destruction, but through the steady, unshakable work of building something that could not be bent. And from that point onward, the name humanity in galactic records carried with it a quiet warning and a lasting respect.